Welcome back, Quack Fab viewers. In today's video, I detail the process I went through to raise the bed floor of my 91 GMC Sierra to accommodate a Gen 5 Camaro Independent Rear Suspension. But first, let's get into the why I chose an independent rear suspension. I made this part of the video years ago while my brother still owned the truck. In this video, you can see the two-link setup with Panhard bar. You can see that at full lift and full lower that the axle is pulled to the passenger side of the truck and the tire makes contact with the inner fender well. In order to have the rear end go straight up and down, I would have to change the geometry of the suspension. There are three options that I know of to accomplish that. First one is a triangulated arm setup, either a 3-link or a 4-link. Second one is a Watts link setup, which is what I was leaning toward. However, the first two options wouldn't work for me because they would require a large hump in the bed and I wanted a flat bed floor. Then I got to thinking about the other modifications I wanted to make to the rear end. I wanted to do a rear disc brake conversion, which would cost $350 or up. I also wanted to do a posi rear end upgrade, which would cost north of $1,000. Then I remembered a series on Power Nation TV's Truck Show where they put an independent rear suspension from a Cobra Mustang into a Mazda B2500. And everything clicked, and IRS solves all my problems. The suspension articulates up and down, not side to side, and it already has disc brakes and a posi rear end. It was perfect. Which is why I went with option 3, an independent rear suspension from a Gen 5 Camaro. I bought this one off of Facebook Marketplace for $250. About a year after I began the IRS conversion, I came across a company called PSI Conversions. They make a basically bolt-in bracket to adapt a Gen 5 Camaro IRS into an OBS Chevy. I thought, well, that's convenient. They invent this a year after I started doing this. I realized quickly that their brackets wouldn't work for me because they didn't mount the subframe high enough to lay frame. And at a price tag of $1,400, it wasn't for me anyway.
Plus, I'm cheap!
All right, that's enough for the why. Let's get into the how I raised my bed floor. The upper longer tape line on the bed was put on the bottom edge of the body line. I measured from the lower tape to the body line tape and got just under 3 inches. I used a laser line and traced it with a yellow paint marker around my bed where I wanted to cut it. In this picture, you can see where I measured down 3.5 inches on the forward bulkhead and cut a window. Then I drew yellow lines on the other side of the bulkhead and cut along to free it from the shell of the bed. I cut this area here along, around, and up the rear bedside support. Then I cut the long yellow lines on both inner bed sides. Last thing I had to cut was the outer fender well, number 7 pictured here, to free the bed floor completely from the bed shell. Next, I jacked the bed floor up until the hole I cut in the forward bulkhead was closed, overlapping the inner bed sides. I screwed self-tappers into the inner bed sides to retain the bed floor in its new location. I also cut out a piece of 18-gauge steel 3.5 inches tall and wide enough to close the gap at the rear of the bed. As you can see, I had to remove the inner fender wells, number 8 pictured here, and remove some metal from the wheel arches to make room for the tires when fully laid out. Now that everything was sitting where I wanted it to be, it was time to get to welding. I welded around and up the rear bedside supports, then welded the bulkhead together before I welded down the right side inner bed side, then the left side inner bed side. I then patched a small rust hole in the bed and welded all around the filler panel across the lower rear of the bed. Now that the bed floor was permanently raised, it was time to turn our attention to filling the holes that live where the inner fenders used to be. But we'll be tackling that in the next episode. Thanks for watching Quack Fab. If you have any advice or ideals, please leave a comment. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.